This time I'm going to rank all the historical movies of 2021 that I have seen. I will use the same 5 tiers I used in my historical series ranking video in January, and I will go through the movies in alphabetical order. So, the first one is A Call to Spy. This is an American movie that tells the true stories of 3 young women who worked as spies in World War II. Its box office performance was heavily hit by COVID and its release date got delayed a lot, but it was successful with the critics and it received several awards. I really loved this movie. I didn't know much about these women before and I loved their story very much. I was so nervous towards the end of the movie, wondering whether they would survive their mission or not. I think it is a great movie with a great plot and great characters, and I am putting this in the very good tier. The next one is a really special movie, a Nigerian movie, Amina. It is about the warrior queen Amina of Zazzau. It is on Netflix since November. I was looking forward to this movie very much because Amina is one of my favorite queens. Also, I hadn't seen any Nollywood movies before this and I always like to look into new and different movie industries, so I was really excited about this movie. I think the overall concept and plotline would have been good, but somehow the execution just didn't deliver, to me at least. The main actress was quite good, but the actors weren't on her level. I read some reviews about the movie and most of them agree with me. They also say that there are many Nollywood movies better than this one. So I am putting this movie in could have been better. But I would say that regardless of my slight disappointment, I would still recommend watching this movie to everyone because I think Amina is a very underrated queen and because it's always good to have a breath of fresh air when it comes to historical movies, to watch something new, not another Tudor drama or World War II movie. Let's continue with another American movie, Edge of the World. It is a biopic about British soldier and adventurer James Brooke, who became Raja of Sarawak by defying the British Empire. Brooke is portrayed by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and Dominic Monaghan also plays a major role. This movie received mixed reviews and I can understand why. I think the original story, the life of James Brooke, is very interesting, but the way the movie handled it left some unused potential on the table. The Malaysian filming locations, the jungle were very beautiful, and the acting of most of the actors was also very good, so I kind of enjoyed the movie and I can recommend it, but it is far from perfect, so I am putting it in decent. Then let's see the next one, Marakkar, Lion of the Arabian Sea. It is an Indian movie about the legendary Admiral Kunjali Marakkar and his epic warfare against the colonizing Portuguese. I found this movie among my Amazon Prime Video recommendations and I also saw that it was among the Indian submissions for the Best Feature Film category at this year's Academy Awards. There have been several Indian historical movies that I have watched and liked, and I must say that Marakkar is among the less good ones. I think the main storyline would have been very interesting, but there were so many quite irrelevant subplots that it deflected the main story, and thus the movie became extremely long and it was unable to hold my attention for 3 hours. So this movie also goes into the could have been better category. The next one was one of my most anticipated movies of 2021, Queen of the North. It is a Danish movie about Queen Margaret I. It is the most expensive Danish movie ever made and you can really see that in the movie. It has very high production values. It is not about Margaret's whole life, just one particular year late in her reign. The plot resembles a Shakespearean drama in a royal court with a lot of plot twists and interesting characters. I really liked Margaret's portrayal. I think the actress was very good. I liked the movie too, very much. It was high time this great queen got a movie about her. I have seen a few Danish movies and this is certainly the best I've watched so far. I would really like to put it in the highest tier, but there was a certain historical inaccuracy that I really disliked, so I can only put it in the second best tier. And now comes probably the most famous movie on this list, Spencer. It is a psychological drama about Princess Diana and the Christmas of 1991 when she supposedly decided she would divorce Prince Charles. This movie has received a lot of awards and nominations, particularly for Kristen Stewart's performance as Diana. Now, this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think this movie is not good at all. I found it extremely boring. There is no plot whatsoever. You just see Diana suffering, but you don't get to know why she's suffering so much or how she would end up deciding on the divorce. I must confess that I was not convinced by Kristen Stewart's performance either. I think Emma Corrin's Diana would beat her any day. I don't know. Maybe it's just me that this type of movies, these artsy movies, are just not for me, and I am unable to appreciate them as much as others do. For me, it was a waste of time, and what I paid for the cinema ticket was a waste of money. The next one is a Polish movie, The Champion. It tells the real story of a Polish boxing champion who in 1940 arrived with the first transport of prisoners to the newly created Auschwitz concentration camp. There he became famous for his victories in the camp boxing matches. Now, among historical movies, World War II is a very popular topic. And among World War II movies, concentration camp movies are also quite frequent. So, if you want to create something on this topic that stands out from the rest, that is not just another drop of water in the ocean, you have a very difficult job. I think this Polish movie did a decent job at that. This boxing setting made it quite special, and the movie showed the viewer what was it like to be put in a concentration camp as a Polish soldier. I don't think it is among the best World War II movies, but it is a decent effort. Then we have another movie set in the 20th century, but it is not a World War movie, but a Cold War spy thriller, The Courier. It tells the true story of a British spy, Greville Wynne, and his Russian source Oleg Penkovsky. Wynne is played by Benedict Cumberbatch. I think it is a tremendously underrated movie from 2021. It should be much more famous. The plot is extremely engaging, it keeps you on the edge of your seat constantly, the acting is just superb, both main actors should receive awards for it. It is one of the best Cold War movies in my opinion. So I am putting this next to A Call to Spy. The next one is a British movie, The Dig, which is about the excavation of Saturn Hoo, an Anglo-Saxon burial site in 1938. This was a historically quite important archaeological discovery to establish the history of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of East Anglia. The movie is on Netflix and it stars Carey Mulligan, Ralph Fiennes and Lily James. It is a quite acclaimed movie. It received 5 BAFTA nominations. To be honest, the actors were quite good, but I found the story a bit shallow. It seemed too slow to me sometimes, maybe it should have been shorter. It was not bad, but also not particularly great, so I am putting this 2 in the decent tier. Let's continue with another movie I found on Prime Video. It is a Dutch war movie, The East. The film is set in 1946 in the Dutch East Indies at the time of the Indonesian National Revolution, and it combines fictional and historical characters. It was an extremely expensive movie and you can see that on the visuals and the war effects, but other than that, I think this movie is a big missed opportunity. It doesn't deliver what it promises, that it would show the inner conflict of the main character torn between his country and his conscience. This inner conflict and his gradual disillusionment with his own country should have been explored much more thoroughly. Even though the movie is very long, I still had the feeling they cut out half of the scenes they filmed because there were so many plot holes. So I think this one could have been much better. Then we have another Dutch movie, The Forgotten Battle, which is available on Netflix. It depicts the Battle of the Scheldt in 1944 and it follows a Dutch Axis soldier, a British glider pilot and a Dutch resistance woman. This movie is definitely better than The East. It is a well-written, well-executed war movie. All three perspectives were well explored, but to me it seemed quite predictable. It had all the cliches of World War movies. It would be a positive that it discovers a quite forgotten part of World War II, but even so, it is quite easy to predict what comes next. So I am putting this movie not higher than decent. The next one is a bit of an odd one out on this list. It's The Harder They Fall. It is an American Western movie available on Netflix. I wasn't sure whether I should bring this movie here or not because its plot is only very loosely based on true story. Almost all events in the movie are fictional, but I still decided to mention it in this video because almost all characters are based on real people, outlaws and heroes in the Wild West. I enjoyed this movie very much. It is a good Western movie with a classic yet unpredictable revenge story full of turns and twists. I can recommend it to anyone who enjoys Western movies, so I am putting this in the very good tier. Let's continue with the movie I was looking forward to the most in 2021, The Last Duel. I really love Ridley Scott's historical movies, so I was very excited about this one, both for his directing and the all-star cast of the movie. It is set in 14th century France, and the story centers around the last officially recognized trial by combat fought in France. Although the movie received positive reviews from the critics, it was a box office disaster. I must confess that I absolutely loved this movie. I hadn't known the case and the duel, and in the cinema watching this movie I was so nervous, wondering who would win in the end. I was literally on the edge of my seat during the duel, and I didn't even want to blink to not miss anything that happens on screen. It is also a very thought-provoking movie. It made me think for days, and the actors are especially good. Jodie Comer's performance is probably the best I've seen from her. I find it absolutely outrageous that this movie is absent from the Oscars and the Golden Globes. I am putting this in the highest tier in my ranking, of course. Then we have another World War II movie, The Russian Last Frontier. It tells the story of the heroic fight of the Podolsk cadets at the Battle of Moscow in October 1941. The young cadets are completing their training in the military school when they are suddenly called to the front to defend Moscow from the Germans. Russian war movies are usually made of a lot of money, and you can see that in the production values, the effects and the visuals. It is the same in this movie too. It was a good movie, an interesting and heroic story of many young people, but the pacing seemed a bit weird to me. There were several hollow parts in the movie that should have been cut out, in my opinion. I have seen several Russian war movies better than this, so this also goes into the decent tier. And then the last movie for this video, The War Below. It is a British war movie and it is set during World War I, not World War II, which is always a positive for me because about 90% of World War movies are about the Second World War, so anything about the first is a breath of fresh air to me. The War Below tells the story of a group of British miners recruited during the war to tunnel underneath no man's land and set bombs below the German front. Since the movie is about the miners and their work, not the fights themselves, it is devoid of the usual war movie cliches. You would think that a movie that is set in underground tunnels mostly is not going to be very exciting and dynamic, but this movie is. I enjoyed it very, very much. If you want to watch a war movie that is different from the others, I highly recommend this. It was a very, very good movie. So this is it. There are movies from 2021 in every tier. This was a bit of a mixed year. with good and bad movies as well. Hopefully 2022 will bring more great historical movies and the pandemic won't cause more premiere delays.